Larry, how's it going?
Going good, Phil. How you doing, man?
Not too bad. So you run a is it a non for profit or what was the name of
Yeah,
it again?
Disaster Aid USA, and it's a nonprofit 501c3 charity.
Right. But how did that manifest in your life? How did you grab into that?
Well, that's an interesting question. My paying job is I'm a financial advisor, so I've been a financial advisor for 29 years. But I was in the Army for 10 years, Desert Storm vet. I was in a combat unit, but I'm not combat veteran. We didn't see action. Part of my skill set, of course, I'm a statistics guy, I'm a numbers guy, numbers that's why financial advising fits well. But in the Army, I was known, just as the sergeant that could get things done. It's like, hey, well, I don't think this can be done. Hand it to Sergeant Agee, he'll figure it out. So when I got out of the Army and started, doing financial advising, there was just like this big hole of, you know, wanting to do something more.
Hmm.
Give back to the community. I joined the Army when I was 17, so I've always thought, served my country, served my community, helped others, and then couldn't figure out what to do. And then Hurricane Katrina hit New Orleans, and so I started helping out with some charities there. 30 days later, Hurricane Rita hit where I lived, Lake Charles, Louisiana. So started helping out with more charities here, and just found I had a knack for problem solving in the spur of the moment. When you've got to do on the fly decisions. It's just kind of like, hey, things are broke. How do you fix them? We don't have policies and procedures for it. Figure it out. And a number of people just kept telling me, hey, you've got a knack for this. And so I joined a couple of different nonprofits, and went overseas and built refugee camps and designed refugee camps, and even designed my own refugee tent. Just because I saw the ones in the field were junk. And probably 4, maybe 5 years into doing that, me and another guy named Bob Grill, he's also a veteran. He's a Marine out of the state of Maryland. Decided to form our own charity, Disaster Aid USA. And there were other people that we knew around the world that were with different charities that we had worked with. And so they formed like Disaster Aid Australia and Disaster Aid Canada. And we formed Disaster Aid USA. And we really wanted it to be survivor focused and donor focused. And that's because we wanted the donors, if they wanted money to go to a certain disaster, they'd have went to that disaster. We didn't raise money for one disaster, spend half of it, and then just kept the rest.
Yeah.
And then there's a lot. How do I diplomatically say this? I'm just going to say how we do it. Let's put it that way. It's very survivor, very survivor oriented. And I say survivor because people that deal with natural disasters, they're not victims. They're survivors. Wasn't a
Exactly.
crime committed on them. And we wanted to make sure that all of our actions, we want to go in and fill the holes in a community, where there's no aid, instead of just doing cookie cutter aid, like this charity does just this, whether they need it or not. We really, we call it smart aid, where we adapt the aid that we bring in, or the teams that we bring in according to what that community needs. And it's what those survivors need. It just started taking off. And next thing you know, we've got 38 trailers all over the country loaded with chainsaws and generators and muck and gut equipment. We've got skid steers and backhoes and a rescue boat. So when something happens, we've got equipment pre-positioned all across the country,
Yeah.
and we're able to go in right as the storm passes, or right after the flood or tornado hits, and get teams on the ground. An assessment team, what I call a strike team, goes in, does the assessment, and then says, hey, what else do we need there? And we work with community leaders. And when I say survivor based, I want to make sure people understand what that is. There's a lot of physical work, chainsawing, mucking and gutting, and we'll explain what that is in a little bit. Points of distribution. That's all the work, that you do. But
Hmm.
the job is to take the stress off of that community, the stress off that survivor when they've lost everything, and they're tense, and you see the shock in their face. And it may be sitting down and talking with them for an hour
Hmm.
and letting them vent and tell their story. And it may be, one out of their whole house, they want to find this one family heirloom. And that's what you do instead of your cookie cutter. We're going to do this, and that's all we do. We make sure what we're doing is what the survivor wants us to do and what the community needs.
Well, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, because you want to be able to help in multiple ways, and that's actually a very smart and pragmatic way of going about it, I think. So walk me through. So let's say we'll use Asheville for an example. So Asheville, the hurricane's done, right? What and then how does this work? Is it how do you guys get called in? Is there a bid? Is it like a construction bid or is it something like that? Or how does that work?
It's kind of a combination. In certain areas, we have MOUs, like memorandum of understandings, with different Rotary districts.
Hmm.
Rotary is a community service organization.
Right,
You
like a
know,
Rotary Club, right? Is that
yeah,
what
they're
you're
like
talking?
the Rotary Club. So
Yeah.
there's like a district like Southwest Florida, Southeast Florida, and a lot of places will have MOUs with them where we go in and train their leaders, train their volunteers, and pre-position equipment there. Those areas, we just go immediately because we already know the communities. The community leaders know us. If something happens, our teams are already there from day one. And then we start bringing teams in from Louisiana, Texas, somewhere else to
Mhm.
supplement those teams. The first thing I do is I'll call the EOC, which is the Emergency Operation Command Center, whoever's running it, the sheriff, Homeland Security, whoever's running the emergency operations, and tell them what we have. Like I've got a tool trailer coming in, chainsaw teams, backhoe team, and a rescue boat, and we're self sufficient for 7 to 10 days. It means we take care of ourselves. They love to hear that because then we're not a problem for them. We're
Right.
we're, we're solving problems for them, not creating where are these guys going to stay, where are they going to sleep, how are we going to feed them. So I've never been turned down when I call with that type of information. They'll say, okay, come to the EOC, check in, and then we're going to assign you somewhere. If you wait for EOCs to call you, that's probably not going to happen unless you're like one of the really big boys like Samaritan's Purse or Operation Blessing, something like that,
Hmm.
because they got 1,000 things to do. You need to
Right.
let them know who you are, what you can do, and that you got trained people. So we don't sometimes we're called in, like when Hurricane Debbie, passed by uh Sarasota, Florida last year. It's one that most people don't remember, but it kind of flooded part of Sarasota. The EOC called us because we had worked with him during Hurricane Ian a couple of years before, and was like, hey, are you guys coming and where are y'all going to work? So we immediately told him what we were doing. So it's kind of a combination of both, but most of the time we call them and tell them our capabilities, and then we show up.
Okay, that makes sense. So it's almost like, well, this X disaster's happened. We need you guys to go over here and use your chainsaw team. We need you to go over here and use your use your excavator or whatever. And then how do you recruit people to come into this? How do they? Do they volunteer their time? How do you find people that have the skill set to do this?
That's actually the tough part. I mean, you get day volunteers once you're there and once you're set up, and then once most people kind of 4 or 5 days have passed and they've kind of got themselves sorted, most people in the community will look for somewhere to volunteer, and we give them that avenue. We'll put flyers out, things on Facebook saying, hey, we've got a command center in this parking lot and we need 30 volunteers to show up, and then here's the positions and skills we need. We need more heavy equipment. We need people that can run a chainsaw, general labor, mucking and gutting, or we need someone to do data entry for taking all these donations in of water and food, and we need somebody to organize and hand stuff out. So one of the things we do is we try to be what we call a force multiplier. And then, of course, that comes from the military. Is instead of just sending my team in with, say, 3 tool trailers and 3 sets of team leads, we are a force multiplier for that community. We train other team leads from that community, and then we give them volunteers to work. Well, like with mucking and gutting, you're basically ripping taking everything out of the house that's wet, all the
Hmm.
furniture, everything, then the carpet, and then all the drywall down to the studs, and then spraying it
Wow,
with mold killing agent. Honestly, it's a lot of demo work. There's not a lot of skill involved, because you can't really tear it up. It's already tore up.
it's true.
So chainsaw work, heavy equipment work, a little more skilled. But mucking and gutting, people who can just want to get a sledgehammer and take out a wall, then they can do it. So what
Right.
we'll end up doing is having, instead of my 3 team leads there, we'll end up having 10 or 15 team leads because we train others locally. And all of a sudden, instead of 20 or 30 volunteers, we're managing 200 volunteers. And a lot of times we'll go to local churches. Churches are really great for providing volunteers.
Hmm.
and a parking lot to set up a base camp in. They want their congregation wants to work and they want to put them to work, but a lot of churches are like, we don't know how to manage this. We don't know how to work with the emergency command center. We don't want the liability in case someone gets hurt. And so
Correct.
we go in and we'll manage their 50 or 100 volunteers through our system, and they fall underneath our insurance. And so we try to pair people, with the right jobs. Some of them are, like I said, points of distribution where they're handing supplies out, and others are doing stuff in the field. We actually have a software we just started with this last year, and the website stability.org. And our charity, had signed up for it, and it's a volunteer management software for disasters. And so it has all my team leads in it, all my volunteers and their skills, and people can even, go to that site and request help. Hey, I've got a house with a tree on it. So right then it sends it to a chainsaw team lead for him to look at.
Wow.
Yeah, so the software is making us much more efficient,
Hmm.
and getting people into the field quicker and matching the right jobs up. Now you always gotta call and verify something, because a lot of times people will call in for their family members, and by the time they call in, the tree already may be taken off, the house roofed, or tarped. So you always call to verify, but it's a way for people to give us the information that they need help. And it's a way for the community to say, hey, I want to help. So there's a place on there. If you want to volunteer, click here, enter your information, any skills you have. And then I can even go in and say, I want everyone who can muck and gut. And it'll give me a list of people that can do that. And I can text and email them directly and say, show up at this address, you know.
There you go.
So
Yeah.
it's helping us be more efficient in the field. And then it logs the really cool thing is it logs the value and impact to the community.
Okay.
And what that means is, like, FEMA has a cost per volunteer. Like a
Okay.
regular volunteer, could be $36 an hour. Okay. It was $20. I think they just upped it to 36. But a backhoe operator may be $100 an hour. Chainsaw, $75 an hour. So according to their volunteer, skills, they're assigned a dollar value per hour. And so someone goes and works 10 hours and, it's $100 an hour. Okay. Well, you just did $1,000 worth of work.
Hmm.
And how that feeds into it is, if you keep good enough records, which, who's the volunteer, where'd they work, and you got a team lead that says they signed off and, that they worked there, you turn that into the county, or in Louisiana, the parish, and
Right.
they're able to turn that into FEMA. Usually FEMA has a number that the county or state has to spend before FEMA money kicks in.
Okay.
Volunteer hours count towards that. Like we did $3.5 million. We did $3.5 million worth of work in Florida last year, but we probably only spent $50,000 in donations to keep my teams in the field for 4 months. So we
Wow.
turned $50,000 into $3.5 million for that community. And instead of just spending $50,000 on supplies, there's a lot of charities out there providing supplies. There's only so many out there doing what we do and being that force multiplier. So that same 50,000 creates an economic impact of 3.5 million for that county. So that's really our sweet spot is
Yeah.
being that force multiplier. But matching, going back to your original question, the long way around,
Yeah.
matching skilled volunteers with the job, that's really the sweet spot. It can be tough sometimes, but this
Yeah.
new software we got is really going to help us with.
Yeah. See, someone like me, I'm medically trained. I'm not a doctor, but I can render first aid. I can do that kind of stuff. So
Mhm.
if I were to volunteer, it would stick me into something like that. That's actually kind of cool because it gives that person the ability to do something they're used to doing, and they're more comfortable doing it.
In Texas, we just got back from Texas. The
Mhm.
floods in Texas, Colonel, Texas, which, man, that was a tough one. We can go into more detail about it in a second, but just say, like, with you coming in and saying, hey, I've got, medic experience. Well, I had one site where we had 9 skid steers, 3 excavators, 2 tractors, a dozen chainsaws, and probably 30 or 40 other volunteers, moving debris. And then I had another site that was a pod, a point of distribution, and they're, handing out supplies and stuff. You don't need to be at the pod. You need to be at the construction site in case chainsaw goes wrong or someone steps on a nail or a branch hits them in the head. So that gives you a good volunteer experience
Hmm.
because your skills are put to the right use. And I think a lot of times that's where volunteers get disenchanted. They show up and they've got a set of skills and they're not utilized right. And that's
Hmm.
something this software and you know we've been doing manually, but this software is going to make us much more efficient.
Yeah.
Uh, you know, that way we get more volunteers that stick with us and will be there next year instead of saying, "Oh, well, I can do all these things, but you know they have me sweeping a floor, which
Right.
floors need swept, but." Someone with medic skills or backhoe experience don't need to be sweeping floors.
No. Yeah. Well, it's putting, it's just like in the military. I mean, not that I was ever in or anything, but it's like when you do the ASVAB, right? To go into the military, it's like, hey, this is the job you're going to be good at. So it's cutting out the muck and making it to where the people that have the skill set to do the job actually get to the point to do that job. That screams efficiency, and it's a great thing because there's people that need resources, and instead of like trying to delegate who does what, when, and how, you just here's this is what I can do, and it just automatically does it. It just seems like it skips a lot of unnecessary steps.
Like I said, it keeps track of your impact. Like the first 5 days we were in Texas, you know, working that one site, we did $150,000 worth of work in 4 days. You know,
Nice.
because it was a lot of heavy equipment and things like that. So you're able to tell that community, and we like I said, we partnered with the Rotary District in Kerrville too, and so we partnered with them, and a lot of our volunteers came, you know, from Rotary clubs and stuff, and so they're able to go back and tell their community, hey, look, you know, this is what we did in the community when the floods happened. And here's the dollar. So it also then gives the donor who gives to that Rotary Club or gives to Disaster Aid USA feel better about where their money went.
We'll get to the Texas thing in a second, but does FEMA require you to have those hours per dollar, or is that just something that you guys volunteer?
If you want the county if you want your volunteer hours to count towards the county's, you know, I think it's a PA number is what they call it, then you have to keep really good records. You know, you have to, you know, like here's the job, here's the team lead, here's who showed up, here's how many hours they are, and signed by the team lead. You know,
Gotcha.
if now you don't have to do that, you know, if you know, and we did this for years, you know, we went in and we had teams working and volunteers working and we kept the numbers for ourselves, but they weren't, you know, like everything that FEMA wanted.
Right. Oh,
And then, you know, a few years back, we went to some emergency management courses and they're like, hey, look, you're doing the community a disservice if you're not keeping track of it this way and turning it into the county. Honestly, that's something a lot of smaller charities and mid-sized charities didn't know, and that word needed to get out to say, hey, look, just you know, you're there, just keep them this way, turn them into your EOC, he'll turn them into us, and then you know it counts. And a lot of us didn't even know that. So um, that's something on the governmental side that I think they need to do a better job communicating.
well,
But there we don't get me down that road.
yeah. I mean, because government communicating. Good luck.
Yeah, I know.
That's a bit of an oxymoron. Years ago, I used to work with a surgeon, and he told me he went down for Hurricane Andrew in Miami, and I guess that was the Red Cross that was dealing with that one. If you ever find a charity to donate to, just please make sure it's not the Red Cross. And I'm like, why? And he goes, it was the most unorganized, unprofessional. It was just a cluster. Obviously, it's only as good as the people that run it, right?
Right, right.
So if you got a complete and utter idiot running it, that was a terrible, like, and and trying to figure out what to do is always the hardest part. But once you finally get an angle on it and you're able to get it, then it makes sense. Then you can start doing what you got to do. But
Yeah, there's you know there different charities are definitely run different, and I'll just say that you know different charities that we've worked with,
mhm,
like Operation Blessing, they're phenomenal. They're flexible. You
mhm,
know, they do a lot of the same stuff we do, and sometimes, I mean, we'll team up with them and we'll be team leads for them, or we'll switch volunteers back and forth. We'll call them and hey, I got too many volunteers today. You need them, or we'll help them when they're short, or they'll send volunteers to help us. They're very flexible. Great, great. Samaritan's Purse is good. Salvation Army is very good.
Yeah.
The Southern Baptist teams are very good. And working in the field, you come across the ones you want to work with again.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's the ones
Yes.
that you spread the word like we ain't ever working with them again. Sometimes you can tell it's that guy in the field that is just screwing up and it's
Right.
not organizationally. And other times you're like, this is a systematic problem and we're just not going to work with them again. They do
Yeah.
their thing, we do ours.
So, given any disaster, how many teams like yourself do they cap it out at a certain number, or is it just like a like? I mean, could it be? What I'm saying is it was it multiple charities working on the same disaster, like your charity and other ones like so you and then like Samaritan's Purse and now does the Samaritan's Purse do they do the same thing that you do or do they do something different?
They do some of what we do, and then they do, some other stuff that's different. They do a lot more long-term rebuilding, like 6 months after. They have some really good
Gotcha.
rebuild teams. They also come in, right after the storm, like us. Don't get me
Right.
wrong,
Yeah.
but there's certain charities, and I'm not saying this is Samaritan's Purse. A disaster may have to be a certain size before they deploy their teams, because when
That
they
makes sense. Yeah.
because when they deploy their teams, it's a whole command. I mean, like large 18-wheel command center and different things. So a disaster has to be a certain size for some of the big boys to be there. And they might deploy a small team there. Don't get me wrong,
Uh-huh.
but we're a much smaller charity and we're pretty flexible. We can send people, you know, to even like little small, high wind storms or small flood. But there's times when people said, "Hey, how come you didn't go here? We're a small charity. We didn't get any donations. We didn't have the money, and there wasn't a team close by." When a bigger charity may be able to absorb, that cost and still go. So there's
Well,
pluses and minuses to both.
yeah. So we alluded to it earlier, so let's talk about it. What was your experience in Texas?
In Texas, it's almost like a water tornado. Tornadoes are very localized. When a hurricane comes through, it's 50 square miles, maybe 100 square miles. Infrastructure's messed up. You're going to have to ship everything in, right? A tornado, a half a mile away from the tornado, the Walmart's open. The
Yeah.
Texas Roadhouse is open. I mean, the hotel's open. But everything where the tornado hit is gone. Well, that's kind of what happened in Texas with these floods. It happened so fast, so much water dropped, and it's just, limestone and granite over there, so that doesn't soak in. It just flooded. A 30-foot wall of water came down. So anything right along the river, just think of like the river is the path of the tornado, is gone. But everything we were doing, because we showed up there day 2, I guess, and we had, heavy equipment. We had our heavy equipment team from New Brunswick, which is pretty close, come in, and I came all the way from Louisiana, and our Houston teams came. So we started work, immediately, along the river where some homes were. Everything had to be, there was this overlayment of the missing people. There was the overlayment of all the bodies that needed to be found. So instead of just going in and chainsawing trees down and taking it to the road for FEMA to pick up or mucking and gut houses, we had to get clearance from the EOCs to go in the areas, and we worked with the search and rescue people in our area. We weren't the search and rescuers. I want to be clear, not trying to
Right.
take credit for search and rescuers, but we were the ones with the equipment pulling the debris apart, and then they would run the dogs in, to see if something was there. So everything, all the debris had to be moved, but it's like every time you grab a piece of, tree or your chainsaw and it's like, is there a body in here? Or there would be a bunch of flies or a smell. And so you're chainsawing and you're telling the excavator to pick this up. And it may be a bunch of dead fish or a dead dog or a dead deer. But then you add to the level of when we were at these home sites, the families come down and we're like, I think he's over there. I think my brother's over there, because he was
Right.
calling us and saying, I can't get out. I can't get out.
Yeah.
And the house only had 2 walls left and there was a big backwash of debris. And so they thought he was there. And so we spent half a day carefully going through this debris. And they're like in a semicircle waiting to find their brother. And some of them are his friends since like 3 years old. So it was, family and close friends.
Yeah.
And with every grab, you're like, man, I hope a body doesn't fall out. I hope a body doesn't fall out. But then
Yeah,
you're like, well, if we don't find it, then he's
then
still
it's just
missing.
yeah, it's just as bad. I mean, that's that fear of not knowing, and I think when in that situation, if you could give the people a little bit of closure on the situation, then it'll help them process it and move on. Because when the Asheville stuff happened as well,
Right.
I think that was last year. I remember I think it was like 10 days, 15 days after there was a lady on the news, and she was like, "Well, we need to make it clear to the public that we're no longer doing rescue, we are doing recovery now." And I guess for some people that don't understand that, that means there's no one left to rescue at this point.
Right.
If they've been out here this long, they have probably left this earthly realm. But
Yeah,
yeah,
exactly. And and switching to after we were there about a week, maybe 8, 9 days, they switched to the recovery phase. And it's there was just a lot with the Camp Mystic was right upriver from where we were. And as we're digging through the piles, we're finding the little kids' bathing suits, their tennis shoes, the blankie, their pillow, and there's so 25 or 30 missing at that time. And at the end of the day, it just wears on you. And the search and rescuers that were going through the debris, and they work so many hours and then they're off too. It was a whole nother level of stress
yeah,
because of all the missing, and then you had to put some extra care into what you were doing.
yeah. Well, I mean, children are innocent in most things, and you don't want to see them hurt or loss of life over something like this. I mean, it's not preventable, unfortunately, but you have to have like a special kind of constitution to do that. It's like usually it's not going to be good news, unfortunately. Like I hate to keep using the word unfortunately, but unfortunately, it's just a cycle of nature when it comes to this kind of thing. Like, these things they're very little ability to predict them, and it shows you that the power of nature makes us insignificant.
Well, and it's like with this one,
Hmm.
two storms came together. What was left of one tropical storm and another storm, and
Hmm.
historically, they just blow through. Well, if you look at the radar, it blew up like a nuclear bomb and then just sat there. And if you know anything
Just
about Texas
spinning.
Hill Country, the last thing you want is for rain just to sit there.
Yeah. Because correct me if I'm wrong, but Texas is almost just one big flood zone, right? There's not a lot of ways for things to flow, correct?
Well, that's kind of more South Texas.
Yeah.
In the hill country, what happens is it's limestone and hard
Oh,
rock, and so when it rains, in these hills, it just flows down like it's concrete. Yeah, it ends up being a funnel. It ends up just being a funnel. You're pouring water into a big giant funnel, and all the houses are at the end of the funnel, and that's where the 30-foot wall of water comes from. So it was that the people there were great. We had Airbnbs put us up for free,
oh wow. Yeah.
and the teams, they were cooking for us. And the teams, we're used to sleeping in trucks and tents and things like that. And I was like, hey, y'all are spoiling my guys. They're going to expect this every time. Done a dozen disasters overseas, from Pakistan to 8 different countries in Africa, Central America. And I've done 70 here in the United States.
Right.
When you go overseas for like a big earthquake, like in Turkey that I went to, and city of 150,000 just collapsed, the building codes, everything just pancaked, and they're just in there, right? You never get used to seeing dead bodies and stuff, but you get more accustomed to seeing the adults than you do the children. Every time there's a child, it's just one you don't forget.
Yeah.
Like you said, because I guess it's because the innocence, they haven't had a chance to live yet. They haven't, they haven't gotten married and had kids. They haven't got a chance to live, and you're just like,
The one area of surgery that I refuse to work in is peds. It's just because and I don't have kids, as people know. It's just nothing that I've ever wanted to do. But it's because they don't understand what's going on. They don't understand, and it's hard to communicate with them because they're so young. Like you get a kid that's got a broken forearm, they don't know what's going on. They just know it hurts. Like I have a soft spot for children, and it's hard to see them in pain and suffering. But unfortunately, the world we live in is cruel sometimes. And in a place like Turkey, I'm sure their building standards aren't what they would be here in the U.S. And
Yeah. No, there are parts of Turkey when we went. I mean, Istanbul and other cities that we went through were like European cities, like modern and everything. But where the earthquake happened was further out. And so a
Mhm.
lot of these places were 4 and 5 stories tall, like little apartment buildings lined up. And when it shook, I mean, they just all pancaked.
Just
Yeah.
yeah,
Cement they used, not enough rebar, but it was definitely something. It wasn't to the same codes as what was being used in the big cities. So it affected people. When we got there, they said that the death toll was 50,000. And then you start looking at different statistics, and the locals kept telling us it was 300,000. And I was like, well, how are you coming up with 300,000
yeah,
instead of 50,000 like the
it's a
government?
huge yeah.
Yeah, it's a big difference. And so they were telling me that there were 300,000 phones because I got there about 2 weeks after, and we stayed a couple of weeks. So by the end, it's say a month, right? So for a month, there's 300 phones that have not been turned on or used. 300,000. There's 300,000 bank accounts that no one had gone to get any money out of. And so there were all these day to day activities that are signs of a live human being that 300,000 didn't happen. So they were like, some people may have run off to a different area, but why wouldn't they still be using their phone? Why wouldn't they be getting in their bank account? So I don't know what the official number ever turned out to be honest, but I know it was way more than 50. And so that's when one of the things about Texas that was a little hard to deal with is I wasn't expecting, you know, that amount of, what we had to deal with the missing kids and, finding their clothes. And then there was one body found on the piece of land that we were working on. I'm more expecting to see that overseas is what I'm saying, and not Kerrville, Texas. It took me a minute to switch gears, and I had to switch gears into almost like an international deployment of how mentally I had to deal with things.
Well, and let me tell you, compartmentalization is a skill set unto its own. If you're in the military, so you understand what compartmentalization is. But I used to work at a trauma center. You don't have time to think; you just do it. There was one guy particularly got shot right here in the clavicle. There's an artery. It's called the subclavicular artery, and I had my finger in it. You know what I mean? To keep this guy alive.
Right.
So it's like you don't think, you just do.
Just do.
I hate to say it this way, but laugh now, cry later, because the job has to be done before you can process it.
I tell people all the time that, I put everything away in a file cabinet. When
Exactly.
I'm on the job or not, when I'm volunteering, when I'm out there, this deployment goes here or this day goes here. My wife always says when I go around and do, talks, I do keynote, speeches about disaster relief, and one of them's called breaking down barriers through service. Sometimes it's tough because I'll get like way more choked up than usual because all of a sudden a drawer that has been closed a long time
Mhm.
opens, and I'll tell the story and it leads to another story that drawer just opened, and I'm like, man, I hadn't dealt with that in 5 years. And it brings me straight back, the adrenaline dump, everything to like right there. And it's, you got to control it so you can finish your talk, but it's also, people say it lets us know you're human, but it's also, it's weird how that drawer just pops open.
Yeah. Well, it's yeah. Unfortunately, it's like for me, how my brain works is I'll be doing some mundane task and remember something stupid I did or said. Like
Right.
sometimes you remember things like, or you say something that you wish you could just put back in your mouth with a shotgun.
Right.
You know what I
Like,
mean? Like,
wait, I said that with
yeah,
my outside voice.
yeah, shit. Like I didn't. Dang it. I'm gonna go over here and hide in the corner for 20 minutes. But no, it's so
That's
I
why that's why I
understand that.
keep my wife goes with me on all the disasters because sometimes she's over there going,
Stop.
stop,
Zip
be
it.
quiet.
Yeah, no, yeah, don't need that right now. No, no, I get it, and that's but makes it to where you're human. You're not a robot, and that shows that you care about what you're doing and the people that you're helping. And I think you're doing great work. I think it's phenomenal that you actually decided to do this, and that's why one of the main reasons I wanted to get you on. And plus, I wanted to pick your brain about stuff. But and I didn't a charity like yours existed. So now if something like this happens here, I can do this and I can probably be of use and help people. That's all I think. We were put on this earth for two things: to take care of the earth and take care of each other, and we're failing at those miserably, especially in
Yeah,
this day and
we're
age.
not doing good at either one. No,
No, we're not. And so, but if somebody wanted to donate to your charity, how would they go about doing that?
it's on our website, and it's real easy website. It's just disasteraidUSA.org, because we're a charity, so .org. And there's a big donate button. There's also a button that says get involved. And if you click on it, it'll take you to our stability.org site. You can, it takes 2 minutes. It's very user friendly to sign up, and you're put on the list with your skills. And when there's a training or when there's a disaster, you're going to be notified, and then you can tell us if you can't, you can come. If you can't, you can't, because it's all volunteer work. If you can come for 2 days, come for 2 days, or come for one. So that's, you can do either donate or get involved through that site. And our Facebook page is pretty active. We keep it updated with different videos and stuff from deployments. And we want people to know that to make it a family thing to serve your community. My whole family's involved. My wife's been involved. She's actually one of our backhoe drivers, and you never know it. Just pretty southern little, lady with a little voice, but she drives a backhoe and runs a chainsaw, and my daughter, can do both also, and my son, who's 26, 27, can't remember now, he does all that too. So a lot of times we deploy as a family, and sometimes not all the family can go. Sometimes it's 2 or 3 out of the 4, but when you're serving your community as a family, we want people to know that it's not just, oh, hey, we need the big, strong, guys that can lift heavy stuff. First of all, women are really good equipment operators.
Yeah.
And a lot of people don't realize that. But the organizational skills sometimes with women are better than men. And
Yeah.
there's lots of things in the disaster world that we can put anybody to work doing anything. And so a lot of times we get, in fact, probably, I would say over half of our team leads are husband and wife duos.
Nice.
And then their families get involved, or people get a whole bunch of friends to volunteer together. And when you do that, I don't know, you're built to me. What I'm doing is I'm building a legacy, so my kids know to continue to help others.
Exactly.
When I'm gone, my legacy is you make sacrifices. Someone's always worse off than you. You find a way to help someone. It doesn't matter what, but don't just sit by. You can say, I did my part.
Exactly. So I wanted to ask you, since we were bringing it up, you were talking about the distribution of stuff. I heard you weren't in Asheville, correct?
We had 15 teams in Florida, 2 teams in North Carolina, and 2 teams in Tennessee.
Gotcha. So when it comes to the distribution of goods, water, food, whatever, people were saying that things were being taken and not given out. I mean, I just feel that the Asheville situation is an anomaly. And I think that it was just because of the devastation. I think that there was just so much miscommunication and not a lot of things going the right way because of how bad it was. So maybe that's probably just a bunch of, hearsay gobbledygook that we probably shouldn't get into.
I think one of the problems with the distribution is, first of all, it's a logistics nightmare,
Sounds like
especially
it.
in Nashville, because you had major highways that were wiped out.
Right.
So to get 20 miles, you had to drive 100 miles.
Yeah, that makes sense.
There was a huge logistical problem in Asheville, and then of course the further you went into the mountains, it got even worse. We actually loaned one of our side by sides to a volunteer fire department for like 3 months because they lost
Wow.
all their stuff, and we were just like, here, use it, call us when you're through. And that's what they used to get stuff to people.
Or they were using pack mules or horses
Yeah,
or something.
they were using mules. And
I mean, and that just tells you that sometimes we get so focused on technology that we don't think something like that, it just leaves your brain.
the toughest things in distribution is, how well do you vet the people getting the goods? I mean,
Right.
first 5-6 days, you're just handing it out, because usually the first 5-6 days, the people coming up are the people that live there, and they're devastated. And you're just
Right.
like, you need water here. You're saying you need 15 meals. Here's 15 meals. You're saying you need these ice chests, or you need this generator. Take the
Yeah.
generator. Then you get what we call a disaster tourist. So disaster tourists start plugging the roads up and causing, because they want to come by and see what happened and take
Right.
pictures and slow down, just like a wreck on the interstate, right?
Hmm.
And all they do is tick everyone off. You know,
Yeah.
really wears on your patience because now it's 2 hours to get across town instead of 10 minutes.
Yeah.
And they will stop and get the free lunches. And there was an issue where some people came from out of town, and this one company had donated a bunch of generators.
Hmm.
They were like, "Oh yeah, we need a generator." They didn't even live there, you know? And so there's a point where you trust people to do the right thing. And then after a certain amount of time, you really got to start, especially on high dollar items like generators or large amounts of.
When you're in that kind of an environment, the this for this scarcity of things, you don't need some jerk coming from 2 states over because he just wants to look at all the mess to take somebody else's food.
Right. And then it's tough for the people handing out food because I may send 2 people to go get 20 people food. So they don't
Right.
stop working.
Right.
Certain people will say, "Okay, you're a disaster aid. Here's 20 for your team." And others will say, "No, your whole 20 needs to get here to get them." And I get it. So people aren't filling their truck up with food and keeping it for 3, 4 days or whatever.
Yeah.
But that's going to make me take 20 skilled laborers
Out of.
out of commission for 2 hours a day because you just don't go run down to McDonald's and get it. You got to find it. You got the disaster tourist traffic.
Mhm.
You got to eat, and then you got to get back to work. It's at least 2 to 3 hours just to go get lunch if you're going to take all 20 somewhere. So I
Yeah.
send 2 people to get it, and it's you got to figure out which ones are handing out in mass and which ones are handing out per, you know.
Yeah.
So it's a tough situation of
Yeah. Well, some of us will always take advantage of a terrible situation. You will always have some scavenger vulture out there. Well, how can I benefit from somebody else's suffering? It's just that kind of thing. That's just unfortunately another darker side of human nature.
I'll tell you the 2 sides of that are, and I'll talk about the bad side first, is you'll actually have people to come and sign up to muck and gut. And they're day volunteers. You don't know them. They're not my team leads. You don't know. But after a while, you get to notice that they're scoping the neighborhoods and the houses out to see what valuables are left and if the homeowners are there or not. And then they're going to come back after dark and take what they want. We really try to train our team leads to pay attention to that.
Hmm.
And sometimes, people sign in, but they don't sign out. In certain neighborhoods, you have to sign in and out of. It's like, well, where are they? We're going back in, call the cops, you know, or you tell the cops, hey, we had a couple of suspicious guys working with us today and we were in this area. Y'all should probably try to run by that area. Some people will. They'll take full advantage of everybody else's suffering. And it's a shame and it ticks me off.
Yeah.
For the majority of the time, what I've seen, and it goes back to that speech I do called Breaking Down Barriers Through Service, is
Hmm.
when a community is devastated, no one starts asking what political party you voted for, what church you go to. Do you go to the First Baptist, First Methodist, the Catholic Church, or you believe in God at all? Whatever. None of those questions are asked. People just start helping each other.
Yeah, that's the way that it should be.
Exactly. And if there's anything good that comes out of a disaster, is I've seen more communities come together and be closer than they've been in decades during the disaster. And none of that matters. It doesn't matter what race you are, doesn't matter what political affiliation, what church. Everyone's helping everyone. And I've seen people that were you couldn't go in that neighborhood beforehand, and then everybody's welcomed and come in there. And then another neighborhood, maybe it's the opposite of it.
Yeah.
Or it sees the human spirit open up to suffering, and you stop asking those stupid questions and you just help.
When 9/11 happened, you couldn't go 2 feet without seeing an American flag most of the time. When disaster happens, we solidify for a little bit, and then we just slowly start disliking each other as time goes. That's just unfortunately that's our nature as Americans. We thumb our nose at the threat, and then when it's done, we go back to not liking this guy because his shoes look weird or something. It doesn't make any sense. Yeah. But I wanted to ask you, like after Texas, for example, because it was obviously a soul sucking experience for you. How would you decompress after something like that? So what do you do for a hobby to kind of wipe your hard drive after that? Back when I was in working in trauma, if I had a particularly like bad case or whatever, I'd have to go play a video game, watch a funny movie or something, So what do you do in that instance?
Theoretically, I like to hunt and fish, be outdoors. Honestly, the last 3 to 4 years have been so busy, I
Mm-hmm.
have not decompressed,
Yeah,
and
you might want to look into that, brother.
yeah, it's a little way too long. I'm not gonna lie. Or go to the beach. I love the beach, man. Just laying there, zoning out. And not for one day. I want to be there for like 4 or 5 days of nothing.
Yeah, exactly.
But there's been, because I'm running the organization and I'm also a team lead in the field, I'm wearing 15 hats and I'm doing my paying job as a financial advisor and trying to keep up with all the economic decisions to make sure my clients don't lose money. My fault is I don't do that. I tell my team to do it, and my team, for the most part, does it. They'll be like, "Hey, I'm going on vacation here," or "We're going to go camping here." And I go hunting. I used to go hunting a lot. And last year I got to go for 2 days, and I used to go for a couple of weeks, and I used to go fishing a lot. So honestly, that's why I said theoretically,
Wait,
is to get outside and get in nature and just, get everything out of my mind. And I'm not gonna lie, it's past due time. I
yeah,
mean, look,
you got to be
I'm only 25, and look how I look, right?
right. That's hilarious. You got to tell everybody you have to take time out to be kind to yourself because no one else is going to do it for you, unfortunately. You know what I mean? This show is my biggest outlet because I really enjoy talking to people, and here we are. So if you want to tell people where they can find you again,
Sure. Yeah, the charity's called Disaster Aid USA, and it's just disasteraidusa.org is our website. You can donate or volunteer there. And then, of course, we've got a Facebook and Instagram page. Facebook is updated, almost 3, 4 times a week. And then during a disaster, it's like a couple of times every day. You can go back and see a lot of the videos and stuff from us in Texas that aren't for back. So that it's a good way to see the actual type of work we do and who we work with. And you'll see people who are in their 70s, people who are in their teens, and
Mhm.
everywhere in between working for us. And that's something we take pride on, is that we make sure we find a position for everyone. And we really try to involve the youth. We all give the youth a hard time, right? Our parents gave us a hard time, but I will tell you this, the youth that I have experienced, they want to help and they want to help their community. They just don't know how. And if
Exactly.
you give them an avenue of how to do it, and they are all in.
Yeah. I mean, and that's what we're here to do. We're here to guide the youth and we're here to make them understand because it's why we were here before them. Like when I have a new scrub tech at work and I'm training them, it's my job to make sure that they know what to do. You know, I want to say thanks for coming on. I really appreciate it, taking time out of your schedule, come to my little piddly podcast and have a chat.
Yeah, I appreciate it. When the financial advising firm is
Yeah.
real easy, Agee Financial Group in Lake Charles, Louisiana. Real easy.
So I appreciate you coming on. Thank you for your time and keep doing what you're doing. I really feel like you're doing God work. And one last thing, God bless Charlie Kirk.
Amen.